what better fill-in than we can have is Alan Brochstein. He's a Marketfy Maven of the 420 investment letter. How you doing, Alan?
I'm good. It's actually really an exciting time. We had the elections last week, and this week there's a huge meeting out in Las Vegas. So a lot of focus on the sector. I'm actually swamped this morning. I've never seen so many press releases. I guess everybody's trying to get in the middle of all of
So how
this.
did the elections go? I mean, how did the votes go? I think there was something here on the Michigan ballot, but did things go as expected?
I think they did go as expected. There was in some ways, a huge disappointment, not totally unexpected, but in other ways, it's really a sign of the future. The disappointment was in Florida. We had talked about that before, medical marijuana. The good news was that almost 58% of the people in Florida voted to approve it. That's more than voted for their governor. The bad news is they needed 60%. So it did not pass. Uh, it wasn't necessarily expected to pass. So that wasn't a huge shock, given that high hurdle. So a real positive if you step back and just realize that in such a conservative state, that many people were willing to vote for medical marijuana. So
More
it'll happen in a few years, if not
more than
soon.
they voted for the governor, huh?
Yeah, that's right. But the rest of the news was great. Countries or protectorates we've never even heard of, like Guam. I know I sound ignorant, but most of us don't even know where Guam is. They actually voted to pass a medical marijuana program. But really, where the focus was on three votes in the United States for true legalization. Oregon and Alaska passed, so they'll join Colorado and Washington. And then the District of Columbia, very interesting. They voted to basically make it legal. It's not the exact same thing because there were no rules or even any sort of outline set up for the supply of marijuana, but for possession, they voted to legalize it. Now, what's interesting is Congress oversees the District of Columbia, so it sets up a little potential battle in 2015.
I got a question here coming out of the chat, and they wanted me to ask you: have you seen any positive reaction from the government pertaining to Charlotte's Web or hemp oil?
So that's interesting. Back to Florida. There is medical marijuana in Florida, for instance. So I think the question was about the federal government, and the answer to that's not really. But states that aren't even ready to fully embrace medical marijuana seem to be embracing uh, low THC or CBD, high CBD types of solutions. And Florida was one. So they do have a program in Florida, which is actually kind of interesting. But the federal government has not really addressed this yet. It's going to need to do so, in my opinion, in terms of the scheduling. And that's a potential 2015 event.
And when can Florida revote on it?
I don't know. They don't have to necessarily vote. The legislature could go ahead. This was a constitutional amendment. It was really ironic because apparently, I think it was 2013, maybe 2014. Actually, I'm sorry, 2012, maybe 2013, that they set this up to create the supermajority requirement, and that measure itself barely passed with the majority. So pure irony that they required a 60%, but there's talk that there could be a legislative solution. It's a little early to make that call, but that's one of the schools of thought out there.
Okay, when you come on, we always like to ask you about what's going on in Canada, and that could be a big potential market there, and of course, shares of FITX, FITX.
Sure. So it's Canada. The last time I was on, I was trying to make the point that Canada doesn't seem to be fully appreciated yet. It should be. And I think I made this point last time. I've been sharing it pretty broadly, which is that unlike the United States, the companies operating in Canada have federal legality behind them. There's no questions. As a matter of fact, Tweed, which was the first licensed producer, there's 13 right now. The first one to trade publicly, there's 5 publicly traded out of the 13. They announced today a mortgage on their second facility at a 5.3% interest rate. In the United States, for any company that's trying to do that type of transaction, you're talking about 18% or higher interest rates. Uh, in Canada, we are seeing institutional coverage of these names. So in the United States, if you read a research report, it's usually paid for by somebody you don't even know the name of the author. It's a complete joke. We're not really seeing institutional level research. But in Canada, Bedrocan has two analysts covering it. Tweed has two analysts covering it. So we're starting to see a real market up there that's not just for penny stock investors, but really for institutional investors as well.
Okay, now so I'm looking at this FitX
Yeah,
Fit. Yeah.
FIDX is an interesting story. I've had no position in this for a while. I told you guys it was very controversial, and when I say I've had no position, I have not included it in my paper portfolio. And we exited in August at the end when they came out and said that the license was imminent. And there's been a delay there. It's really hard to understand the full story because Health Canada doesn't comment. But if you read between the lines, there's a zoning issue in this town of Lakeshore where they built this facility. So a lot of people thought FIDX was a complete scam, which is not the case. I know, you guys have seen it. So they have this facility. They're ready. They're ready to go, but they don't have the final approval from Health Canada. Last week, there was a meeting on Tuesday night in the little town of Lakeshore, not too far from you guys, and it broke out into I'm trying to think of, I don't want to use a four-letter word, but it was terrible. Let's put it that way. The police had to be called in. True drama. But at the bottom line was the company maintains that its zoning is proper and that the town of Lakeshore is violating its rights by changing the rules. And the town of Lakeshore is telling them to take a hike. So it'll be interesting to see the way it plays out. There's a precedent in Western Canada and in BC where the province overruled local zoning. So that's one avenue. During this heated discussion Tuesday night, the company talked about a potential move. So they'd have to abandon their facility for now
Ooh.
or add an additional facility in Tecumseh. That's not too far from you either, if I'm not mistaken, right? Tecumseh?
That's actually where Dennis is at.
Okay,
Yeah.
so well, Dennis, you can drive around. I'm not close. Is he on? I don't even
Nope,
think he's
nope,
on.
nope. He's not on it.
Ask
Just
him to drive around, or I'll check in with him because there's supposedly three applicants in Tecumseh, but like I said, there's never any like definitive news about where they actually are in the queue for Health Canada, how far along they are. But there have been a couple of examples of companies that have acquired these late stage developments that needed some capital to get to the finish line. Maybe FIDX pulls that off. I don't know, but well, it's been a wild ride to say the least.
what about Cannabis Kinetics Corp? It's another low price stock. Is that
Is that the
something you?
symbol CANK?
Yes, sir.
Oh boy, my initial research there is stay away, and I have not spoken to anybody from the company. I've read their filings and I've seen what's going on. And is that a question coming in from one of your
Yeah,
listeners?
yeah. They just
Okay.
asked if you could take a look at it. So we always
Yeah.
you
So they
appreciate.
have a funky capital structure. I would urge anybody to take a look at the resumes of the people behind it, the all the preferred convertible preferred shares that are out there. Uh, without even commenting on really the legitimacy of it, the valuation is insane if you factor in the convertible preferred.
Okay, we're on the line with Alan Brochstein here. He's a Marketfy Maven and author of the 420 Investment Letter. Well, we always have to ask you about the best in breed here, and one of the only stocks I know that's being covered by Wall Street, and that's GWPH. Now, when you were on the show last time, the stock was trading in the 80s, and you were hoping for an entry point under $60. I mean, you had one day to get it under 60, Alan. Were you fortunate
I
enough
think
to?
I think I was looking for under 70, and it did go under 60. You're
Okay,
right.
I'm sorry.
We
I'm sorry.
we
Go
we
ahead.
pulled it off. We just for in the paper portfolio, we actually it was kind of interesting. I got stopped out of the first trade, and it which was good because it plunged further. But we got back in and almost got shaken out of that one, but it turned out well. But that's just short term. I think long term, this one's a real winner. And I think what happened for anybody that hadn't been following it closely was a confluence of things. First of all, they had their first analyst. It was actually an R&D day in New York City, And at that R&D day, they shared two pieces of information. Really, one was negative. Their ulcerative colitis drug, the initial results suggested that even though it might work, it was really hard for people to comply. Long story short, the THC had side effects that some people didn't like. So it didn't kill the whole concept. They just need to go back. The main solution, I think, is going to be titration. In other words, starting people with low doses and then building up, or just changing the amount of THC. So they're going to go back to the drawing board on that one. But the good news was on their key drug, Epidiolex. And as a matter of fact, since then, so they shared good data. And then since then, they've actually accelerated. They're actually now officially in a clinical trial.
Yeah, that's the big drug for that. Alan, I know we asked you about the sector and everything, but you made a great comment there about when you were, attempting to get into GWPH, and you said, you had your first entry and it didn't work out, and you got stopped out, and you were glad that you did. Then you took another stab at it and you got it right. I mean, I know that you have experience, long-term experience in investing, not only in this sector but in other sectors. Is that what you find out happens to you quite a bit? I mean, not, just in your general investing, because a lot of people get discouraged. They say, I'm going to buy it, then they get stopped out and they forget about it. But if you take a manageable risk, then you can take another shot at it, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, first of all, I need to give a caveat to anybody. The penny stocks are really hard. The volatility is so high. Uh, so a company like GW Pharma really is more in my wheelhouse. It's not as volatile and crazy and irrational as some of these penny stocks. But I think the point you're trying to make is a great one. And I the swing trading that I had a product on Marketfy, and before that I ran separately, where I tried to position for trades that I thought could produce within about a 2 week time frame, uh, 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 reward to risk. And if you do the math, you don't have to be right that often. I mean, you have to be right depending on the ratio, a third of the time roughly to be a successful trader under that scenario. There's a lot of different ways to trade, but I'm not a pure technical trader for sure. I try to incorporate what's going on fundamentally, and uh, I think that if people realize that it's okay to lose, but you need to control risk, and I have a hard time doing that in these penny stocks, to be quite frank. But certainly in a company like GW Pharma, I think that's a good strategy, and where you can find those spots where if it breaks down, you're wrong, and you just have to admit you're wrong, and we're human. It's Nobody's going to be right on every trade.
Okay, one final question for you, Alan. Here, uh, you evaluate these stocks and you talk about them on Marketfy. Do you short these stocks?
So first of all, I always tell people I don't trade any of the stocks myself. I feel like that's a conflict of interest. So I'm just providing trade alerts, and that's a small part of what I do. By the way, I mean some people follow them, some people laugh at them, whatever it is. The service that we're offering is really a due diligence platform. So I don't recommend short selling any of the stocks, especially given that they're penny stocks. But I will express negative views, like I just did on Kink, for instance. So that's really what we're doing at 420 Investor.
Okay, all right. Alan Brochstein, Marketfy Maven and author of 420 Investment Letter, giving us a good perspective on the cannabis industry as you can get. Alan, thanks for coming on. We hope to speak to you again.
Yeah, I'll fill you in. I'm going out to Las Vegas this week, and I'll fill you in afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
All right, take care, guys.
Alan Brochstein, author of the Marketfy Maven of the 420 Investment Letter.